I just got my hands on the Google 8 Pro, and I can definitely say that a few things surprised me, yet I now have more questions than answers because about 3 years ago, I stopped upgrading so frequently, and I stopped relying on my phone's camera, and I picked up, well, a camera because of the sheer physical limitations of this device. But now it's almost 2024 and phones are not only exponentially smarter thanks to improved AI, but they're also bigger too. So it's now worth reconsidering have phones like the Google 8 Pro or even the Apple 15 Pro Max, which I did some comparisons with, but have phones reached the point where the specs of the camera and the magic within the software, have they made them on par with mirrorless cameras, but in some cases exceed them? So my main question is it now time to put the camera down and pick the phone back up? Well, to not bury the lead here, and I'll do some direct comparisons with both a proper photo camera and a video camera against the Google 8 Pro. But yes, in some instances, the Pixel 8 or the 8 Pro is all you need with so many new AI features from blur to unblur to magic editor to auto eraser to night sight and more. Whereas in other cases and scenarios, which I'll show you, it's still a hard no. I don't think we're quite ready to put the camera down, but in a few months, that could all change. So I'm going to show you my initial findings now as my first impressions of the Google Pixel 8 Pro because come December, when the video boost feature gets added, which I think could completely change how this camera works, especially at night, that could turn those hard no's into soft yeses. So I will give you an update with a more thorough review on video boost then, but for now, I think I can still answer if the Google Pixel 8 Pro is worth it, as not just a smartphone with a camera, but as a device to create content, and dare I say art. First, let me show you some quick footage before I give you some confusing specs, settings, and things you need to change immediately, which out of the box is weirdly not turned on. So things you need to adjust before you even take your first pic or press record. Okay, I got the Sony ZV-E1 over here and the Google Pixel 8 Pro over here. And I've got this in aperture priority and I've got this in the cinematic blur mode. The depth of field is quite different. I'm on an 18 over here with dynamic stabilization, so that's probably closer to like 22-ish. This is probably HDR, and this is an S-Cinetone. So you're probably getting quite a bit different colors, more saturation, of course. You're probably getting a lot more sharpening as well in the Google than on the Sony ZV-1, which is 12 megapixels. Yeah. Do you have a preference? Sort of going in mixed lighting conditions, but not going in directly in the sun. I can. It'll probably get blown out on the Sony ZV-1. I do have an ND filter. Now back in the shade. All right. And now let me briefly show you maybe a more fair fight, the 8 Pro versus a 15 Pro Max. Okay, so here we've got the Apple 15 Pro, and here we've got the Google 8 Pro. I'm holding both of them. You can see that on the Apple, we've got our cinematic blur happening, and I changed the f-stop all the way to 2, which is as blurry as it gets. We don't have that option on the Google 8. So let me switch the phone around so you can see what the cinematic blur will look like on the rear-facing cameras by comparison. Okay, so this is the Apple 15 now. I'm in cinematic blur. Again, with the f-stop 2, which is as blurry as the background can get. My hair is a little crazy. I sort of did that on purpose to see how it would cut around and get this blur effect. So we're in 4K 24 frames per second, which you can't do on the Google 8 Pro. You're only up to 1080p full HD. And I think it's 30 frames per second for some reason. So yeah, the image quality is obviously gonna be better on the Apple, but let me show you. Okay, so this is the Google Pixel 8 Pro. And instead of f-stops, they have like 100% down to 0%. So this is 100% blurred, which means it's probably around f2 as well, but we're only in 1080p full HD. And again, I think it's only 30 frames per second. But what do you think about my hair? How's it cutting around it? I still obviously think that the cinematic blur on the iPhone is better, but I don't know, what do you think? Which one's better? Now the video quality, especially in cinematic mode, is clearly better on the Apple, but I prefer the photos on the Pixel and frankly always have. So for many years, I created content solely on my phone. I took photos, made art, and shared images almost exclusively created on previous pixels. Remember when sharing photos was a thing on Instagram? And I spent countless hours perfecting my grid and editing my images all within my phone. And I did so almost as a challenge to prove that megapixels and decades of expertise, especially within photography, were unnecessary when composition, what you fill the frame with, and taste level, so your creative eye and how you edit, trump the technical know-how and the tool itself, the camera being used. So my hypothesis, a 2015 phone in the hands of an artist willing to experiment but with no photography background is more likely to get a good shot than, say, a high-end camera in 2024 in the hands of an experienced photographer but who lacks imagination and an artistic eye. And I still believe this to be true. Any artistic medium should not be gatekept by experts or expertise, but welcome to beginners who have a creative point of view that they want to share. And smartphone photography embodies that ethos. So I'd always prefer an artist with a sub 1-inch sensor over a snob with an expensive camera, except when it comes to video and low light performance. Then give a fool a full frame camera and you'll get better footage. Yep. I was legitimately surprised by how much better the 8 Pro performed than I expected. Okay, this is probably an unfair test. This is a Sony ZV-1 shooting at 12,800 ISO with a 1.8 lens on. At night with some porch lights, but it's mostly dark. Okay, this is the Google Pixel 8 Pro. Again, same lighting conditions, shooting at night. 4K 24 frames per second, not in HDR. I can't tell how it looks because this is a rear-facing camera. Now it's worth noting, of course, video performance for all phones or point-and-shoot cameras will suffer without sunlight, but not in photo. So I took some shots with both the rear camera with night sight, which uses AI to enhance and smooth out the noise, which is more evident with the front-facing camera. However, the front-facing camera gets an assist from the screen's light. But of course you have a flash, which my high-end cameras don't have, and the flash is bright, like almost too bright. So with that, and AI cleaning it up in night sight mode, shooting photos in the dark is where the Pixel straight up beats a camera, and so does this feature. Now, speaking of brightness, and a good segue to some quick specs that you need to know about, because like I said, out of the box, the phone defaults to a very non-pro camera. And first, I don't know if y'all know about nits, but for camera people, nits are important. So a nit is simply a unit of measurement for brightness. And most screens that we typically have used, from computers to cameras, and most phones up until now, range from about 400 to 600 nits, which is around what my $4,000 camera screen is, which doesn't have an EVS. So you have to buy an on-camera monitor, which I'm looking into now, and you'll be lucky if you can find one that's 1,000 nits. So double most screens. And this is crazy, but the Google 8 Pro has a brightness of 2400 nits. They call it their Super Actua display. Again, it's like 6 times brighter than most screens I use and brighter than the Apple 15 Pro Max. So this is a clear win. And rant over about brightness and how great the screen is, not to mention the refresh rate, but honestly, there's so many features that I don't have time to get into. So let me just stop talking about nits and get into the main bits, like the camera. Now, the 8 Pro has a triple rear camera system with a 50 megapixel main sensor, which you have to turn on, and I'll show you how to do that, but it's supposed to increase low light performance by 21%, and a 48 megapixel ultra wide lens with 105% increased light sensitivity and improved macro capabilities, and the macro feature is fantastic. And you also get a 48 megapixel telephoto with a 5 or 10 times optical zoom, but you also get a 30 times digital zoom after that, and even in video seamlessly or mostly seamlessly, you can go from that to ultra wide. Now, for the front-facing 10.5 megapixel camera, they added autofocus, but like you saw, not cinematic blur. Now, you may think 10.5 isn't that much, but remember, my Sony ZV-1 and my Sony FX3 are only a 12.1 megapixel sensor, and that sensor was just used to shoot a whole IMAX big-budget sci-fi Hollywood movie, so resolution isn't everything. Yet here I took my Sony A7Cii, a brand new 33 megapixel camera, on a walk with me to the park to face off against the 50 megapixels of the 8 Pro. Well, actually it was annoyingly only 37.5, because I'll get into that. But luckily, I checked the settings before I had this photo dual off, and again, for whatever reason, you still have to actually change the camera settings to unlock the full specs. So first in photo, and I love in the menu you can actually toggle between photo and video modes, but first go to the gear for the settings and go into Pro settings and change the resolution from the default 12 to 50. You can also shoot in RAW and get a DNG file along with your JPEG. I just choose JPEG, and then lens selection, which allows you to manually select which lens you want to use, from ultra wide, wide to telephoto, or let your camera do that automatically. You can then, like in any proper camera, adjust your shutter speed, ISO, white balance, or shift brightness and shadow, and then change the focus or depth of field. You actually get focus peaking here, which is amazing. To be honest, it's unnecessary for me. I mostly want the smartphone to use its smarts. Yet that's all up to you, but at least change the resolution the right way and not how I do it. So if you're like me and you like to shoot in 16:9 and not 4:3, you max out at 37.5 megapixels. So if you want 50, you need to go in general settings and make sure you change the ratio to 4:3. I personally love to shoot pics with a wider field of view, like I'm shooting a still for a movie. So it's a trade-off, which reminds me, you also need to change your pro settings for video. I prefer 4K 24 frames per second, but you also get 4K 60, which is great. But now in cinematic blurred mode, you are limited to full HD 1080p. And this is where you can see the technology moving towards replicating that depth of field with AI trickery, but it's not quite there yet. And Apple's cinematic mode is still way better than Google's, but it's catching up. Now, Apple also has us beat with a 10-bit ProRes RAW, but we do get 10-bit HDR, which is clearly not the same thing. And in fact, I turn off HDR because I hate converting a phone's HDR in post. Regardless, I'm very pleased with the colors as is, but mostly how the Pixel uses software to expose for both the foreground and the background. This is something that cameras really struggle with, whether you're an experienced photographer or not, unless you bring a light or a reflector to bounce light. So I think the Pixel has the camera beat here too. Yeah, I'll let you be the judge of what images you like best and which camera came out on top for you. But for me, clearly a world where, say, a full-frame Sony camera had some sort of operating system within it using Google's AI magic and in-camera editing, like with Google Photos, which I didn't even get into, but you can magically edit the photos to remove objects or graffiti from a tree, which I did here, or even people from a picture. No, kidding, but seriously, you can also edit audio. Here in the Google Pixel 8 Pro over here, and I've got this in aperture priority, and I've got this in the cinematic blur mode. The depth of field is quite different. I'm on an 18 over here with dynamic stabilization, so that's probably closer to like 22-ish. And I'm not sure exactly what the depth of field is here, but it looks more like a 30 or maybe a 28. So again, imagine combining the best of a mirrorless camera, the larger sensor, with real lenses and depth of field with the best AI software from Google Pixel. Well then, I think we'd have the potential to be both artists and pros. Now, thanks for your time and attention. I've got a bunch more videos about videos like this on the way, so consider following along and subscribing. All right, thanks guys, bye.